Bring the classic arcade experience home with Arcade 1-Up.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Player One Start. In my previous video, we took a look at the Arcade 1-Up arcade cabinets. I went ahead and unboxed them and put them together, and I gave a demonstration of the Pac-Man machine. But I also got the Atari Centipede and Asteroids combination cabinets, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at that cabinet, as well as give a review of both cabinets in this video. So if you haven't seen part 1 yet, you may want to go back and watch that before continuing here. I'll leave a link to it above. That said, let's go ahead and get started with the Atari cabinet. Alright, now on to the combination machine that includes a lot of Atari games. And I decided to choose one of the title games to start first, and I'm going to go ahead and go with Asteroids. And again, I'm going to say that this game controls about how I'd expect it to. It actually doesn't use the trackball or the wheel to control the character. You actually just use the buttons on the machine, just like you would in the original Asteroids. The sound is a little bit softer on this machine than it is on the Pac-Man machine, and I have it all the way up. It just sounds a bit quieter. But for those of you that are a fan of the original vector graphics in the arcade, unfortunately, pixel screens are not capable of reproducing the exact same effect that CRT monitors can when producing vector graphics. That is not a fault of this machine, it is just a fault of all modern monitors. And I would not expect them to put a CRT monitor into these machines, as that would drastically increase the cost and make it a lot less efficient. So, for the purpose of bringing something to the home in a cost-efficient method, I would expect them to use an LCD screen, and this looks just as good as on any other emulator, so I'm going to say that that's not really a problem with the machine. But also to give you an idea of why this just looks like it's in black and white, vector graphics machines did not produce color. If there was any color to a vector graphics machine, it was usually done with an overlay, where they would put a colored piece of plastic over the screen. In fact, even the original Space Invaders didn't have any color, it just had an overlay over the screen, even though they used pixel-based graphics. Otherwise, in terms of gameplay, this is an arcade-perfect port to an arcade system. And I still believe this game provides an excellent playthrough experience, especially from a game from 1979. Alright, next we're going to play Major Havoc. And this game actually produces color vector graphics. So this game is kind of a combination that includes a fixed shooter, a platformer, and a Lunar Lander sequence. Although mainly developed by Owen Rubin, some levels were designed and tuned by Mark Cerny, who would later go on to become president of Universal Interactive Studios that produced Spyro the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot. This game was initially released as a dedicated arcade cabinet in 1983, and then 1 year later as a conversion kit for older vector arcade games like Tempest. If you notice from the opening screen, it actually uses the wheel to maneuver your character around, and I feel this game is actually pretty fun. This is actually my first time ever playing this game, so I can't really give it much more of a review until I've had time to properly test it out. Next we'll try Quantum, which is another color vector arcade game that was designed by General Computer Corporation for Atari Inc. and released in December of 1982. The premise of the game is loosely based around quantum physics, in that the player directs the probe with a trackball to encircle atomic particles for points. It is important that you do this without touching the various other particles. Once the particles are surrounded by the probe's tail, they are destroyed. Again, this is my first time playing this game as well, but since this is the first game that uses the trackball, I can tell you that the trackball actually performs really well. This is something I had heard about in other reviews where they said there was a problem with the trackball, it didn't want to roll right, or it had a lot of resistance, but mine is working fine. Here is Gravitar. This came out in 1982, again by Atari, and it uses the same rotate and thrust controls as Asteroids, only Gravitar is known much more for its difficulty. So in this game, the player controls a small blue spacecraft. The game starts in a fictional solar system with several planets to explore. If the player moves a ship into a planet, he will be taken to a side view of the landscape. Unlike many other shooting games, gravity plays a major part in Gravitar. The ship will be pulled slowly towards the deadly star in the overworld and downward in the side levels. I mean, overall, if you did like Asteroids but wanted a different twist to it, this game isn't too bad, but I don't know if this is going to be a game that I come back to very often. Next we'll move on to Tempest. Tempest is a 1981 arcade game by Atari, and it takes place on a three-dimensional surface, sometimes wrapped into a tube, which is viewed from one end and is divided into a dozen or more segments or lanes. The player controls a claw-shaped spaceship named Blaster that crawls along the near edge of the playfield, moving from segment to segment. Tempest was one of the first games to use Atari's color quadrascan vector display technology. This allowed vector graphics to display some color, although it can only draw one color per scan of the screen. So it was able to make more colors appear on screen at once by making more scans of the screen at once. This was also notably the first game to allow the player to choose their starting label, a system that Atari dubbed a skill step. This is not my first time playing this game, and I do really enjoy it. Although this is a game where I really miss the vector graphics that would show up on a CRT display, I really wish that LCD screens could reproduce it for this game, because it would provide a bit more nostalgia for me personally. But this is actually pretty good as well. Alright, next we're going to move on to Missile Command, and this is a game that is very iconic that was released by Atari for arcades in the early 1980s. This game also uses the trackball, and I really do enjoy it for this game because it is a lot easier than using a joystick to point and shoot at the missiles that are coming down and attacking your bases. I do have to say that most of my experience with playing this game has been on the Atari 2600. However, the last time I played it was on the Atari 5200, and that game is also not as difficult as well because it has the non-self-centering joystick, so you can just leave the missiles pointed where they were last pointed at the screen, as long as you don't move the joystick back. You can do the same thing with a trackball, so I think that's the only home console so far that provides a more faithful port to the arcade version. And yes, I kinda can't believe I just said something positive about the Atari 5200, but there it is. Otherwise, the gameplay of this game is pretty straightforward. You are given control of your missile bases, and you have to shoot down the missiles before they attack your bases and fighters. You survive for as long as you can, but as soon as all your bases and cities are gone, you are done. Ooh, I forgot about that trippy background at the end. That is pretty cool. I wasn't keeping count, but I'm assuming we're about at the halfway point as we have hit another title game from the machine, and that is Centipede. This game also uses the trackball. So this game is a vertically oriented fixed arcade shooter game that was produced by Atari in June of 1981. It is probably one of the most commercially successful games from Video Arcade's golden age. The player fights off centipedes, spiders, scorpions, and fleas, completing a round after eliminating all of the centipede that winds down the playing field. Whenever you hit the centipede, it splits at the point of impact, and the farther down it makes it down screen, the faster it goes. This game was ported to probably every single 8-bit computer and home console that was out at the time, and hence that's the way I'm used to playing it the most. However, this is probably the first time I've ever played it in an arcade cabinet with arcade controls, and I have to say, I really enjoy playing it with the trackball rather than with a joystick, which is what I'm used to. So again, I am not disappointed at the arcade ports of this game. And here's Lunar Lander. Again, this is a game that does not use the trackball or the wheel. Lunar Lander is a single-player arcade game that was developed by Atari and released in August of 1979. In the game, the player controls a Lunar Lander module as viewed from the side and attempts to land safely on the moon. The player burns fuel points to rotate the module and fires a thruster to counteract gravity. The player earns bonus points on the skillfulness and difficulty of the landing. The game resets the module after every crash landing or after every successful landing. When the game resets, the player is given a new terrain, and the game ends when the player runs out of fuel. Players can insert more coins at any time to buy more fuel. However, in this port, I don't think you can add more, at least I haven't figured out how to do it yet. I personally enjoy the gameplay style of this game as it is more relaxing and laid back, and I also have to give them props on the sound effect as it really does sound like you are powering a thruster whenever you press the button. I have to keep in mind this game was in 1979 and the game's sound effects were very primitive, so I give them props on how they did this game. And here's Millipede, which is the sequel to Centipede. It offers a little bit more variety of gameplay elements, along with a wider array of insects than the original. However, the gameplay is almost exactly the same, and although I'm glad they included this game, I really don't think this adds a lot more value to the machine, because if you don't like Centipede, you're not going to like Millipede. It may have added more value if they added a completely different game. Now, here's a game I have never heard of before. This game is called Crystal Castles. In this game, the player controls the character Bentley Bear, who has to collect gems located throughout the trimetric projected rendered castles, while avoiding enemies out to get him and the gems. This game is notable for being one of the first arcade action games with an actual ending, whereas most games either ran on a timer or continued indefinitely. And I have to tell you, for a game in 1983, this game is very impressive and incredibly addicting. Because I've never played this game, I think this may be my new favorite game on this machine. It is kind of odd and it takes a little bit of time to get used to the controls, but once you do, this game does provide a challenge, and I think that you could get through it if you were persistent enough, and I believe you'd have fun doing it. At least I have so far. I still haven't beat it, and I can't really give it a proper review as a result, but again, kind of a hidden gem they've included on this machine. I'm sorry if it's something that a lot of people know about, but since I didn't know about it, it's a hidden gem to me. Next we're on to Liberator, which is a game I've heard of, but I guess after seeing the game, I don't really think I've actually played it. This game was released by Atari in 1982. It is based on the Atari Force comic book series published by DC Comics from 1982 to 1986. Liberator has been described as the opposite of Missile Command, where you destroy cities from space instead of defending them. The reason why I probably don't remember playing this game is because they only produced 762 arcade machines. Now you hear that number, you may think that's a lot of machines, but keep in mind, that's not very many in the grand scheme of things when you had other games that were being produced by the thousands. And I have to tell you, I would probably not know how to describe this game had I not read the quote that it has been described as the opposite of Missile Command. That's pretty much what it is. So you go through a couple training rounds and then you're firing at planets, destroying bases and cities. I think the graphics on the planets look very cool, and keep in mind, this is from 1982. So I don't know how a home console or computer at the time would have been able to reproduce these graphics, as to my knowledge, I don't think there's any home port of this game that was ever released until later on the Xbox and PlayStation 2. This game is kind of fun, although I do find it a bit difficult. However, if you do like the gameplay style of Missile Command, you may like this game a bit more than others. And well, here we have come full circle to Asteroids Deluxe. And just like Pac-Man Plus, I'm not quite too sure what the differences are in this game, but I did enjoy playing this a little bit more than I enjoyed playing the original Asteroids. Again, it was neat that they added this game, but I really would have preferred this game and then replacing the original Asteroids with something else, so at least I can get more value out of this machine. So first, here are my thoughts on the Pac-Man machine. Like I said, I got this machine because I really like this game, and yes, it was worth it to me to get a machine that only had this game on it. For the price point these machines can sell for, and it could be right now between $200 or $300. For that price point, unless you really enjoy this game, this machine actually may not be worth it to you. The only thing I think this machine could have had better in terms of gameplay was they could have included at least Ms. Pac-Man, or maybe even another version of Pac-Man other than just Pac-Man Plus. So that's the only thing I fault it for the gameplay. As for the build quality and the joystick quality and buttons, I've had no problem with mine. Now, that's not to say that you might not run into a problem with yours. I have heard some people have horror stories where one machine they got was fine, the other one they got just was complete garbage. From what I've heard, the company is actually very good at replacing parts and sending you replacement kits, most of the time free of charge from what I've heard. So that's a plus, but that's actually something I don't need to utilize because it just worked right out of the box. That said, let's move on to the other machine I got. Alright, so now we're talking. This machine actually is very good. I like the game selection on here, and I definitely like the fact that it has double the amount of games of a normal machine. If I were to choose a machine that I was going to mod and put my own games on, I wouldn't choose this one. I feel like it's got the right amount of games for it. I do enjoy the games that it comes with, and I think it adds a lot more value to it. I really wish, though, that it wasn't twice the price of all the other machines, at least when I bought it. Again, as for the controls, I've heard a lot of people tell me, of course after I bought it, that I'm going to have problems with the trackball, and that I don't know how to call it, the volume control knob, whatever it is. I've heard a lot of people tell me that also doesn't work either. However, I've had this machine put together now for about 2 weeks as of the publishing of this video, and I gotta tell you, I've had no issues whatsoever. I have actually researched this on YouTube and other gaming forums, and I've seen people demonstrate how bad their experience were with these things, and I completely, and utterly agree they had those experiences, but it didn't happen to me. So I can't attest to any of the problems. I can only say that when it works out of the box, it's fantastic. So with that in mind, and the fact that I really enjoyed the games that I got with it, I'd recommend these for someone who wants to collect these arcade games. But anyway, that's just my opinion of these machines. Have you gotten one of them? If you have, or you have any experiences to share with these machines, please leave them in the comments below. I'd really like to see what your take is on it. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like to see some of the content I've already done, feel free to click on some of the suggestions that are popping up on your screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.